We're going to talk for a few minutes about transactional love or conditional love. There's a couple of ways people say this. And we're going to talk about like what that looks like in parenting, some of the obvious and maybe not so obvious ways this comes through. And then we're going to talk about kind of how this is related to relational trauma. So transactional love, conditional love basically is, and again, this is a non-academic definition, is basically kind of an environment where a parent, an attachment figure, will only show love and nurturing and affection if the child is doing what they want. If they're doing what they want, behaving how they want them to behave, looking or presenting, in terms of physical appearance, how they want the child to present, kind of signing on or engaging in beliefs and practices the parent wants them to engage in, okay? So some of the ways that this can look, and it's also very much like the withdrawing of love if one of these conditions is met, or punishment, okay? Or just like disconnection. Like I'm not gonna even engage with you if you're doing this one thing. So how can this look? Okay, so if a child is having a tantrum, which we know is developmentally appropriate, depending on what age they are. And when I'm saying a tantrum, I'm saying like crying, maybe some screaming, kind of throwing their body on the floor kind of stuff. Again, like really hard. And I will even use the word annoying, irritating, but it's developmentally appropriate, okay? And if we are like sending a kid to their room for that behavior, we're basically saying, I can't handle your strong emotions and I'm going to shut you away until you stop having them. I don't have the capacity as a parent to like get curious, to stay with you. I don't have the emotional capacity to stay with you as you're having this experience. Instead, I'm going to shut you away, okay? And for some people, for some parents, it's even if like a child is crying really hard, and again, if we have our own history of relational trauma, that can be incredibly triggering for us, okay? And so it's like if your child gets incredibly sad or they're sobbing, some parents will just disengage from their child in that moment. And I would even go so far to say that like some parents will kind of punish them for those strong, uncomfortable emotions. Anger, if a child's expressing anger, mommy, I hate you right now, okay? It's like disconnecting or shutting down from them in that moment or punishing them from that, okay? They're having an emotion. Emotions are healthy. They are important for processing. They're important for development. And so if we're punishing them for having incredibly understandable human emotions, and again, punishing doesn't just mean physical abuse. Like punishing can be words that we say. You're a bad girl. Sending them to their room, giving them some kind of a chore as punishment, instead of us like getting curious about it and trying to understand them and be with them in that moment. What that child needs is a safe, consistent presence in that moment. They may need some space, okay? So if they have the capacity, if they're at the developmental level to say like, I just need to be alone right now, then you can listen to that, okay? But it's not you shutting them away. So it can be things like, it can be things like withdrawing our love or only giving attention when they're achieving. So for example, like let's say there's a child and their father is like pretty distant and absent for the most part, but the child then starts to like achieve or starts to get really like recognized for their accomplishments in like hockey. And then that father just like automatically shows up and like is there and is like, that's my kid, I'm so proud of him. And so the message that's being sent there is that like, I will only show you my love. You're only worthy if you're accomplishing. Okay. And that's a problem. Only showering with attention and love if a kid is getting certain grades. Okay. And so these are some of the things that we're looking at in terms of what is conditional love. And, I would say one of the most harmful ways that this shows up is when a child is having a reaction or they do something that's really hard for the parent to digest, and the parent then goes into what we call silent treatment. So they literally will refuse to talk to the child. They will act like the child's not there. This could mean like they're just walking around the house, like literally acting like the kid isn't there. Or the parent could be going into their bedroom and shutting their door. What happens is like the child is then left to kind of basically what we've talked about before. It's like, it's my fault. There's something wrong with me. I am causing my parent to be this way. I'm bad. They could even say, I'm a piece of shit. Those kind of things. And so why is this a problem? So, and please like note here that I am not saying that parents need to, reward harmful behavior. Like obviously children need boundaries and safety and consistency, and that's the parent's role to do that, okay? And so if there's behavior or if there are things going on that are unsafe, like if kids are acting in a way that they're going to harm themselves physically or harm others physically, or if we see them bullying a sibling or something like that, yes, absolutely appropriate to have boundaries and for there to be developmentally appropriate consequences. But we got to remember that we have to connect with our child through that process then. We can't just write them off, and we can't just, we have to get curious about it and really understand, okay, why are they doing this? Like, what is going on? That is our job to do that. That is not the kid's job to figure that out. Punishment is not getting curious, okay? And so, why is this appropriate? Well, or why is this important? Because what happens is if this is a consistent pattern throughout childhood and adolescence, then this sets up a child to, as an adult and an adolescent, to basically believe that in order for them to be loved, they can't be themselves. In order for them to be loved, they cannot express their emotions. In order for them to be loved, they have to constantly accomplish. In order for them to be loved, they basically have to contort themselves in order to gain that love from whoever the person is that they're seeking love from, okay? It's that idea of like, they're not loved just for who they are. They have to earn it. Love needs to be earned. And then this sets us up for incredibly painful relationships and patterns in adulthood. So we have to really recognize that. If you are a parent, and if you're like, oh my gosh, like I think I'm doing this, okay, don't panic. Get curious about it. Do a little bit of research on this. If you're doing this, it's probably because this was done to you as a kid, and like we don't even really recognize that. And so that's really hard to recognize. There's a lot of really helpful resources available. I'll kind of put some of these under the comment section here. I just really appreciate you being willing to, again, get on here, to be curious, to expand, to understand better. And I wish you a great day. Bye.